Clap in front of the camera so we can sync up the sound.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Just to start out, I'll just sit here for our interview. Just to start out, if you could state your name and the year you were born and the rank that you retired with.
Okay, I'm James H. Kasler. I was born May of 1926. And when I retired from the Air Force, I was a full colonel.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about your life, where you were before you went into the military? Just a short little synopsis of what you were doing.
I lived most of my life in the South, Birmingham, Alabama, Louisville, Kentucky. Then my dad was a manager for a Commonwealth Life Insurance Company. We moved to Indianapolis, and that's where I was when World War II started.
Okay. Were you?
I was, huh?
Go ahead.
I was only 17 when the war started, and but as soon as 17 and a half, I went down and took the aviation cadet exam, and I passed it. And so I was called into the service right after my 18th birthday,
Okay.
about 8 days after my birthday. I ended up going through basic training and all that, and when they came just after all the tests and everything, they said, we don't need pilots anymore, but you can be a navigator or a gunner. And I knew the navigator school would take almost a year, so I said, I want to be a gunner. I wanted to go to war, you know. And so I ended up, and when I went into service, I was only 5'4", weighed 135 pounds. So they made me a tail gunner, and I went through gunnery school and ended up on Tinian Island, B-29 crew, as a tail gunner, and so I got in a few practice runs, but then we got 7 missions over Japan before the war ended.
Okay. If I can ask you a little bit about your entry, you were enlisted.
I've been enlisted, man.
Yeah, and you were drafted.
No, I wasn't drafted.
Okay.
Well, I've volunteered, but
okay.
when I came in.
Okay. And so did you choose the Army Air Corps, or did you just join the Army and they assigned you to the Air Corps?
Oh no, I passed my aviation cadet program.
Okay.
So ordinarily I would have been called in as a pilot trainee, but they didn't need pilots then. The war was it would take too long to train them, and the war was almost over. Oh. Oops.
Okay. Can you describe a little bit what your training was like?
Well, I went to Sheffield, Texas first. I went through basic training and all the exercise, everything. And we got on a train and headed down to Fort Myers, Florida. We had an old Buckman Field out there. When we got off the train, and the guys lived in shacks with a tent on top of them, and we got off the train, and we started walking down toward the camp. All these guys come running out and said, "Go back, go back." It was a big joke, I guess. Anyway, so I went through flexible gunnery training there, and we did a lot of ground where you get on trucks and go around, and they'd fire skeet out, and we'd shoot at them and all that. But then we had B-24s there, and so we flexible gunnery training from the B-24s, and they had, and you had P-59s that had they called them pinball machines, and we're firing the rubber bullets. Some of them you'd light up the wings on these things. P-59s make shoot past on us. But then we have the other B-24s would come by with towing targets, flexible targets. We'd fire at those. They stopped the 59 things after we shot one of them down. So, but that wasn't very smart, really. I think. Anyway, we just dry follow them, you know, the cameras, that sort of thing. Anyway, then we went out to Lincoln, Nebraska, and that's where they formed our crew. The first night we got there, the bus picked us up, and we got off the train, took us out. It was about 10 degrees below zero. They marched us out, and they put us in this barracks. Had this, no lights, no heat, nothing. And this friend of mine said, "We'll freeze to death here." And so we went down, went in the mess hall, which is usually open, and so the guy let us curl up in the corner of the mess hall, wait. He was pretty nice about it. Anyway, went to Amoguardo, New Mexico. After that, for gunnery training, we had B-29s there. They had the old Wright Cyclone engines. The new B-29s had Pratt Whitney. Had those Wright Cyclone engines. Every time we flew, we'd lose a couple engines. Oil stream out the thing, and it was amazing. Lousy engines they were.
Those were the B-29s?
The B-29s, yeah.
Okay.
And
when we talked to Colonel Locke, Vivian Locke,
yeah.
He said that they were pretty durable, that they could take quite a few hits and still hold together. Did they improve over the war?
Or B-29 was a fantastic airplane, but these, like I say, had the old had the wrong engines. Right Cyclone engines. These Pratt Whitney were the airplanes we were going overseas, and we never had any bit of trouble with the engine over there. But these engines were terrible down there. Anyway, we got our orders to go to up and pick up our airplane in Sacramento. So that morning we were walking in the mess hall. It was dark, and all of a sudden it was just daylight, and we could. What in the world happened about 15 seconds? You know, just daylight, no noise, anything, and. But that was a test bomb, the nuclear bomb at the out in the desert there. Yeah. But we found out later that we figured out that's what it was. But
you never heard it? There was never a noise?
No, there was no noise. Just everything. All of a sudden, there was a light. Anyway, our mess hall was all manned by German prisoners there at Amoguardo. So anyway, we went over to, first we landed in Hawaii, went into Hawaii on our way over, and then we went to, from there we went to Wake Island and then into Guam, and then they assigned us to Tinian, so that was one of the Mariana group. So we went into Tinian. The first...
Before you get on to what happened there, could you describe for us the crew of a B-29 and what each crew member did?
Well, we had 4 gunners in the back. We had the 2 blister gunners sit on the side. The tail gunner, that was me. We had a top turret gunner, who they called central fire control gunner, who could, if they were under attack, he could take control of all the guns on the ship and direct fire. They had the radio man that had a navigator who sat back here with a gunner, and he had a navigation system and all radars and all that stuff. Had the radio operator, had 2 pilots, had the bombardier up in the nose of the airplane, and the 2 pilots. Between our section and the forward section was held the bombardier, the radio man, and the engineer. I forgot the engineer. And the 2 pilots. There was a tunnel about this big around that you could crawl through over the bomb bay and then into the other section. So when our gunner, or our engineer, he was a great guy, but he loved his tequila and bulldog gin. So when the day we were leaving for to go overseas, he came back totally smashed. And we were supposed to leave in 3 or 4 hours. And finally, and he was really getting obnoxious. And so I cold cocked him, and we carried him on carried him down, they put him on the airplane. He didn't wake up for a few hours. But anyway, our bombardier was familiar with starting the airplane, so the engineer was passed out, and we passed over San Francisco. They were going out. So.
Do you remember your reactions to getting the orders for your first overseas assignment and how you felt about that, being sent to Guam?
I thought it was fantastic. But when I was in gunnery training there, I got in a little pushy fight with my first sergeant, okay? And so they came up and he said, I went through for the lieutenant there, who was a pretty good guy. Anyway, he said, you want, 3 days KP or 7 days ordnance? And I said, 3 days KP. So they put me on pots and pans, and there's nothing but grease. And it was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. So then after that, I got another little scrape, and I went through for the guy, and he says, 3 days KP or 7 days ordnance. I said, 7 days ordnance. And 7 days ordnance we were throwing the 114-pound ammunition boxes around and dipping ammunition for color and all that. Well, I did this about 4 times in a row, 5 times. The last time, I came back, and the guys in the barracks said, "Hey Jim, you're on your orders. You're going to Santa Fe, and you're going to be a gunnery instructor." And I said, "Like hell I am. I'm not going to be a gunnery instructor. I want to go to combat." So they said, "Well, you better check in," because they started processing today. And I said, "Hell, well." So I went back out, got in the truck. We left before it got light. Went back to the range. We were usually out there 11, 12 hours. And so I was out there working. I looked out, and it was practically a desert out there. And here comes this. I see this Jeep plowing across there with dust flying. And he stopped. He says, "Kasler, you son of a, get in this Jeep." And I said, "Well, I have to tell the guy I'm working for. I can't. Don't give me get in this Jeep or I'll kill you." And so I got in the Jeep, and they come back, and they go in the barracks, and he, "Where's your stuff?" And I said, he started throwing all this stuff in the footlocker and all that, and tearing my clothes off the hanger, and throw it in there. "Get in the Jeep." So we went to the processing center, and the guy says, they started in, and the guy says, "We can't get him through. We can't get him through, Sergeant." So I would go back. By this time, the guy had started out as lieutenant. He made captain, and then he had made major. And at the time, so he was happy as little bee. And you go in front of him, he says, "Let me tell you something, Kasler. If you come in here one more time, I'm going to take your stripe away from you." I was a PFC. I made PFC. I'll take your stripe. And I started laughing, and so did he. And he said, "Get out of here." So So they, but anyway, they,
That's
so,
how you ended up getting assigned overseas instead of.
oh no, well, the next order came in, then I had the orders to go join a crew. So they, when we landed at Tinian, there were 6 8,000-foot strips that ran, 4 of them on one end of the island, 4 over here, and they had a couple of fighter strips in between. But the strips were cut right out of the coral rock there, and when you walked out, they put us in a tent between the runway center, and when you walked out, the white coral in between the runways, just blinding, you know. And so our radio operators had read that if you cut all your hair off, they'd grow back thicker. You know? So he cut it all off, and we got out that white coral rock and all that stuff. He never grew another hair on his head, so. Completely bald. Anyway, we moved up on the hill, and shortly after we had 2 or 3 missions, our first 2 missions were over Truck, which was an island down there, was supposed to be secure, and they were just bombing range. They're drop bombs on this island, and we thought the Japs were all inert there, we weren't doing anything. And one of the missions was we ran down there and shot down one of our airplanes. So that then we started our missions, and I got in 7 missions before the war. And the first mission, we came in, we were supposed to, town is called Tokiyama, and General May had us going in from 8 to 12,000 feet. In Germany, those airplanes went in 30,000 feet or higher if they could get there. But the Japanese didn't have that much anti-aircraft fire. They did have some, and we were fast enough that the Zeros really had trouble making more than one pass at us. So the first mission went in, I was back in the tail, and I was looking around, and of course they had glass all around me, and I could see the city burning up ahead of us when we were bombing. Anyway, we ran in there at 8,000 feet, and when we hit that thermal coming off that city, it literally threw our airplane up and over on its back, and we started down, and fortunately the pilot didn't try to wrench it out completely. He just slowly pulled the airplane out. So if he tried to wrench it out, probably ripped the wings off. But we thought we were going in, for a minute there. But then we had the other missions. We had after our 3rd mission, we started carrying more bomb load, and we started landing at Iwo Jima, and so because we had to refuel because of heavy bomb load, so we went to Iwo Jima. And the first time I was there, the day before, of course, it was a secure island then, but the day before, 2 Japanese snipers had killed another Marine from Mount Suribachi. The place just full of caves and all that. But when I got up there and I looked out in the harbor, and the harbor was absolutely littered with ships they'd sunk, tanks that they'd destroyed, all kinds of vehicles laying on the beach there. The problem with Iwo Jima was they thought this was sand, but it was volcanic ash. And it was, 4 or 5 feet thick. No way, you could not walk in it. The only way you could get there is just crawl through it. So the Japanese let the Marines land on Iwo Jima. And so they landed there, and here they were struggling to get, several waves came in, and they couldn't get up this volcanic ash. And they were trying to push their vehicles up. And when it came crowded, then the Japanese opened fire from Suribachi. it was the worst disaster in Marine history. Over 7,000 Marines were killed in that stinking little island, 3 Mile Island. It was terrible. Anyway. But we landed there on Iwo Jima a couple of times, and then the last time we were bombing the Iwo steelworks down in southern Japan, and it was shot up. We started losing fuel, and so we went into. So they directed us into Okinawa, and I went to. We were the first airplane to land there at Kadena, up on the hill. I got out of the airplane. I was in my shorts and T-shirt. Walked over. All these Marines are along the edge of this hill there, looking down this valley, and I look down the valley and hear these guys are firing guns in this cave, and then they wanted to run up with a flamethrower and he'd shoot in that cave. And all these Marines sitting there eating their lunch, just casual. And then they brought they carried this one guy up, and he's on a stretcher there, and this chaplain was giving him last rites, and I thought, oh my God. And this one guy says, "Do you come in on that thing?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." And he said, "You wouldn't catch me in one of those things." I said, "Brother, you wouldn't catch me down here either." So, but Okinawa was tough on our troops too. And the ships, my God, the ships, they sank out there in Okinawa from the kamikazes. It was something else.
Can you discuss a little bit? You're talking about getting caught in the thermal updraft and fire time. Can you talk a little bit about how the people you were with dealt with fear? Did they not think about it, not talk about it? Did they discuss it?
Oh, sure, they discussed it. When I came out after that first mission, I came out of the tail when we were on our way back, and this fellow named Kavanaugh and this other named Benet, we called him Yo-Yo. They were the two blister gunners, and they set the blister. They had a big blister this size, and they were sitting right there, next to it. But they had, when I came out there, they had rosary beads all over the cockpit, because they're both good Catholic boys. But they did said a few prayers there going in. So, but it never really bothered me.
How would people get themselves motivated to go on a mission? Was it just pretty much this is what you were there to do? Did some people find it difficult to go on a mission because they were afraid what was going to happen?
Oh, I suppose some people did. Some people really worried about it. It never really bothered me. I was excited to go. But, and I think most of the guys, especially B-29s, felt pretty secure. If the B-17 pilots, we lost over 1,000 B-17s over Germany. And, my God, it was a turkey shoot for the Messerschmitts and the Focke-Wulfs. But after when the war ended, we flew over to Saipan, which was only 3 miles from Tinian, and picked up supplies we were going to drop to the POWs in Japan. They had on top of their buildings there at the steelworks and all that, they had POW on the top of them, and which the Japanese put there to keep us from bombing thing, So we were dropping supplies. They gave me a big K9 cocking camera, and I opened the side hatch on the back of the airplane. I leaned out, and I had that camera. I took pictures, and I just cock it, and it's a great big camera. We flew over Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and we flew over this day after Nagasaki, even before the war had been declared. They said they were going to quit, so that's why we went up there. And so I took pictures of Ground Zero in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and then we flew over some of the airfields. And in the trees in the airfields, there were hundreds of Zeros and Bettys lined up. just waiting for our invasion. They were going to be have been an absolute disaster for the Japanese and for the Americans too. We probably had 1 million casualties if we'd gone in there, because everybody was going to fight us. That's the way that was their mindset. It was amazing, really. But and after the well, after that, I didn't have enough points to go home. I didn't have a point system, and half of my crew went home, and the pilots and all them. But they formed another crew, and they told us to take a B-29 to over to the Philippines, Clark Field. But we were up on a hill, and I'd climb down this hill there, and I climbed down to swim, and I was on the beach there, a real nice beach, and it was in a cove like this. And I was laying down there one day, and I looked up to the hill there, and here comes a vehicle flying off the hill in the water. I said, "What the heck?" Here comes another one, and another one, and another one. So the government said, "Destroy all your vehicles, you wreck the economy if they bring them home." So I sat there, they probably threw, I was there, 100, 150 of our trucks and Jeeps off there. So this friend of mine, we went down, we stole 2 Jeeps, and we cranked them up into the Bombay of the B-29 and took them to the Philippines with us. I got to the Philippines, and I don't know why, but I was a staff sergeant by then. But they put me in or a buck sergeant, I remember there. And so they put me in charge of the motor pool there at Clark Field. I had 6 Japanese guys working for me, prisoners working for me. One of them could speak English pretty well. And so we got along great. They were afraid to go home, because they had surrendered, or most have been wounded and had to surrender. But it was a disgrace for them to go home as if they'd been captured. I don't know what ever happened to them, but eventually we sent them home, probably. Anyway.
Do you recall the actual declaration of the surrender and what happened, what people did?
Well, on Tinian, when we heard they surrendered, a lot of guys ran out shooting their 45s in the air and all that. But they told us to knock that stuff off pretty soon. But no, it was, everybody was happy the war was over, I guess.
The war in Europe ended several months before the war in Asia.
Yeah.
Did people react to the end of the war in Europe and think that meant anything for them in the Pacific theater, or did they just say, well, that's there and we're doing something else?
Well, a lot of those guys that didn't have their time in were sent to the Pacific from Europe. So but the island hopping that we did, all the capturing the islands, they come back in. There was I don't know if it was the right strategy or not, because we had almost complete control over the Pacific before it all ended. Although the Japanese were still sending warships out, and but that cost a lot of lives, like Iwo Jima, Okinawa. Okinawa they really had the casualties there, and the ships they sunk was amazing. I have several friends from Indianapolis that were killed in the kamikaze attacks. Yeah.
Another big difference between the European War and the Pacific War is that the people in Europe knew the end was coming. They kind of, they knew how much closer they were getting to Berlin and how much closer the surrender was coming. Whereas your guys were expecting to have to invade Japan, and that was going to be a big deal, and it was going to be a big battle, and then they dropped the bombs and it was over. Was that a shock to you? Did you expect it was going to go on for a lot longer and then it ended?
No, everybody was prepared for the invasion. We were with the Evo in our hands, and we were going to carry heavier and heavier bomb loads, and then we were going to they're going to start bombing the beaches and everything wherever the troops landed. So it was quite a relief to, especially our soldiers, that they were going to have to invade there because they knew after Okinawa and Iwo Jima what they were going to have to go through. It would have been a tragic thing for us had we done.
Do you have any idea, or do you have any guess of how much longer the war would have gone on if they hadn't dropped the bombs and we would have had to invade?
Oh, I think it'd probably gone another 6 months. The other thing that we were happy was that the Russians would try to invade if they'd gone just to get a piece of the pie, because there were a lot of islands there that they wanted to get their hands on, that the Japanese owned.
Before we move on to the post-war era, do you have any other stories or anything in mind about World War II that you wanted to tell before we moved out of that?
No, on one of my missions, I would have to. I started the APU, which is auxiliary power unit in the airplane, and then I would run down the ladder and help pull the chocks for the after we started the engines. When we started the engines, a whole crew was out there. We'd have to run through the props, turn them over several times before we started the engines. I mean, just before they fired them up. Anyway, so I'd help pull the chocks, and I ran back up the ladder. I mean, there's one mission I ran back up, and the top rung of the ladder broke. I fell all the way down and smashed a hole in the tibia of my knee, and it hurt bad. But I still climbed back up and got in the airplane. That thing filled up with calcium, evidently, and I've had a lot of trouble walking with it after that. Until I got we go to the movie, and then it'd take a while to get warmed up. Anyway, when I got out of the service, we went to Camp Atterbury, and had an auditorium, about 600 guys, and this guy got up and says, "The Russians have been giving us trouble in Europe, and we're going to release you. We'd like you at least to sign up for the inactive reserve. If you ever decide to come back in service again, it'll count as your on time when your pay time." And now that auditorium, 600 guys, I was the only one that went down and signed up. And so after that, I went to Butler University. I met my first date back in Indianapolis was with my wife, who was afraid of me. So, see what happened when I came home. I was 6 foot tall and weighed 185 pounds, and my mother didn't even know me when I came home. And because so I came home, I was a big guy with a runt complex. So and every time Martha would hear of me or see me, I was in a fight with somebody, and so I cleaned a lot of clocks in Indianapolis. But anyway, she wouldn't have anything to do with me. After 3 dates, after chasing her around a canoe, and so she gave me a date maybe once every month or every 2 months or something. But I really liked her, and anyway, this went on for 3 years. So, and I was in Butler, she was in Butler, and I went over to pick. I started dating her best friend, this little gal. She was cute as a button, and Mary Jo Pierce. So I went over to the sorority house to pick Mary Jo up, and here's Martha looking around, you know. And she says, and Mary Jo was upstairs getting ready, and Martha says, "Well, I've heard you quieted down a little bit. I might consider going out with you again." I said, "Oh, really?" Actually, I was pretty excited about it. Anyway, we started dating again, so I ended up getting married. But anyway, we didn't have a cent when we got married. I was working a couple of jobs. I was working for a construction company, and then I was working at a filling station, and I was selling asphalt driveways on the side. Because I'd done a lot of work in the asphalt business, driving trucks and that. Anyway, I was reading the paper one day, and they said that the aviation cadet program was closed. It was going to be closed in September, and to married couples or to married men. So I raced down went out to Fort Benjamin Harrison, signed up, and took all my tests, and of course Martha thought it was hilarious. And so they told me to report to Waco, Texas, and 1st of January. So
you had gone to college, you said?
I was in my 4th year.
Okay.
And so
in college.
I was in business and advertising, in business and mostly in advertising business. Anyway, so I dropped out of college I wasn't even through my first semester there, and I dropped out in college. So I had 3 years under my belt. And you had to have 2 years to be a cadet anyway. So then, not during World War II. So I went to pilot training, and of course Martha was pregnant when I went off. And she came down to Waco, Texas. You know, we were first in the cadet program. We weren't allowed off the base, except in the basic training, not even allowed off the base. 6 months, Waco, Texas. Went to advanced school at Williams Field, and we were allowed off the base there on the weekends. So it was pretty tough. When I graduated, I was first in my class at Waco, and first solo in Williams Field, flying F-80s at that time. The F-80, and I was the group captain. I was in charge of all the cadets in my class. So it was quite an honor, you know. All the parties, the graduation party, I sat with the officers and my wife and I.
What year was it by this time?
This is 51. 51. I
had started by then.
Yeah, I graduated. 51B was my graduating class. When we had our graduation ceremony, as Colonel Leon Gray got up, as he was the group commander there, and he said, I want you to look at the man next to you. And everybody goes, look. And he says, in 1 year, one of those men will be dead. I said, you know. So, needless to say, we did give him a standing ovation when he finished. So, anyway.
Wasn't very motivating.
No, but he was right. And in fact, at the end of 3 years, 2/3 of my class was dead. And but then I went to Korea. That was first of all, after graduated from Nellis, we went to Luke Air Force Base and flew F-84s, which was horrible. The B-HNC is a horrible airplane. They had to stop flying at 10:30 in the morning because they didn't have the power to get off the ground. It got hot. And jet airplanes love cold air. And every time one of them would crash, this operations officer was kind of nutty. He'd go, he had the tail numbers of all the B-24 B's and C's, and he would scratch them off. And so Then from there, I was sent to Prescott, Maine, all the way across country. That's about as far as you can go, you know. Every time I get Martha and that little girl along. We went up to Prescott, Maine. They flew F-86Es, which is the newest F-86 hydraulic controlled stick. From there, they said they were going to do some work on the runway, so they sent us to Dover, Delaware, and then from Dover, Delaware, back to Rome, New York, back up to Prescott. This all happened within a period of a month. And then as soon as I got there, they said, you're going to Pegram Field, Hurlburt Field for gunnery training in 86. So we flew 86 down to Pegram. Yeah. We weren't even there a week, and they ordered us back to Prescott, Maine. So I hadn't even got into gunnery mission yet. Went back to Prescott, Maine, and the wing commander said, the guy there says, Jim, you get ready because you're going to Korea. I said, okay. So Martha's pregnant again, of course, and so we went back to. I drove back to Indianapolis shortly after there. Martha's water broke. We first went to the Methodist Hospital, and then the Galvin Red Cross said, you know, we weren't getting any. Our pay was pitiful, you know, and I couldn't afford to keep her in the hospital, even the rates in those days, and it was cheap. But so this Red Cross gal had her transferred to Camp Atterbury. So she was there in labor, out of labor, in labor, out of labor. And so this went on for about a week. I was supposed to be in California, getting on my ship. So finally, I told her, I got to go. So I left her in the hospital, went to San Francisco. We got on this old Kasler carrier, which is the Sitco Bay, which is they had all of our 86s on top of the deck because they couldn't, the wings didn't fold, they couldn't put them on the elevator and put them down. So we were taking all the airplanes from Prescott to Korea. And so I went to, when I was about 21 days to Yokohama with this old carrier, steaming across the Pacific. About halfway across, I got a message about the twins, the dead twins, and they both died. But they were premature, 6 months. Anyway, so I went up to Kempo Air Base, assigned to Kempo. And they gave us what they called the Clobber College. They give you 3 rides in the 86, just familiarize yourself with the area and all that sort of thing, and check the airplane out. So the first time we went up with some guy, and he showed us around, and the next one they just gave me an airplane. And it was an 86A, and the A was a fly-by-wire airplane. In other words, controls were controlled by wire, running the wings and tail and everything. And so I asked this guy in my squadron there, and I just remembered his name, Coy Austin, that's where I knew him from. He just called me on the phone the other day. Anyway, I said, have you flown the A-bomber? He said, yeah. I said, can you go supersonic like the E? I mean, you roll 40,000 feet. Supersonic, no problem. He says, yeah, he says, but you just have to probably use your trim tab to pull it out. Because trim tabs are just different. It wasn't by wire. It would control the little tabs on the wings and everything. So I rolled at 40,000 feet. I was by myself, and I plunged it toward the earth. And pulled back the stick. Nothing happened. The airplane just kept going straight. And I kept pulling back. And I says, So I hit the trim tab a couple of times, the airplane go, flop! And my stick fortunately hit my helmet, and I was rolling around there. So I just rolled around for about 10 seconds, and while I came out, I looked around and I said, my God, yeah. I looked at G meter, it said 14 Gs, which is all the way over off the maximum for the airplane. So I thought, well, that's enough of that. So I went back and I landed, and I stopped. The crew chief was looking at the airplane. I got out of the airplane and I looked back. The right elevator on the tail had dropped straight down, and the wings and the flaps, everything just metal, just hanging in shreds off the wing. And he says, "What the hell did you do, Lieutenant?" Anyway, they just pulled the airplane into the boneyard, and they couldn't repair it. So, you know. Anyway, but that was the difference between the A model and the E model. The E model is hydraulic control, but half our airplanes were A's and half were E's. I didn't know everybody was going to fly, but it didn't make a difference to me. But and in fact, I got to the point where I kind of preferred the A model because it would go higher because it was lighter, and I could get another 2,000 or 3,000 feet out of it because the MiGs had the Arenda engine, which the British had graciously given the Russians, and so it was a better engine. They'd come across 50,000 feet. We could best we get up to maybe 43, 44, and then we were staggering. So anyway, I went through my. I managed to get. I shot down 6 MiGs in Korea. Of course, I was lieutenant flying wing when I first started, and but I did manage to get a couple of wings, or a couple. Well, my leader was hitting somebody. I was hitting one, but you never leave your leader in this case. But anyway, I've managed to get a couple that way, and then made me an element leader, and that's when I started really getting into the kills. So.
What kind of missions were you doing in Korea where the shootdowns were happening? What was the mission?
Mission just to go up and fight the MiGs. And a lot of them we covered the F-84s, which were bombing in North Vietnam, and so being there over Pyongyang or in covered and sometimes, but usually the only time that you could tangle the MiG is when you let him get the first shot, because they were always higher than we were. If they came down and make a pass at you, we could reverse on them and get on them and start dogfighting. If they get down to 20, 25,000 feet, we could turn with them and put a pretty good show. But anyway, we shot down a lot of MiGs. First, this fellow, Chuck Byler, wrote my book, or was one of the authors, and he's a research guy. He does all this kind of research. The first 3 airplanes that shot down were Russian pilots, and the others were Chinese. Actually, in my 4th and 5th kill, there were 3. My wingman and I got the three MiGs. Only 3 that flew that morning in Alpha and Tongue, and so he getting restless. But anyway, but they come to find out that MiGs didn't fly another airplane that day because they were in shock, I think, because one of those airplanes was a Mao Zedong's son, and we'd shot him down.
Did the North Koreans deny there were any Russian pilots?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure any of them were Korean pilots, but they were at least Chinese pilots.
All right. You were just on the phone randy stuff. We just were talking about Korea. Did you? And you were talking about your dogfights with the MiGs. Did you have other stories to go with Korea?
Well, not really. I could expound them for a long time, but
it sounded like your action was a lot more one-on-one in Korea than it was in World War II.
Oh yeah. Well, there's nothing like there's nothing more glamorous than being a jet fighter pilot. Let's put it that way. And so I really enjoyed that. And but I could talk a lot about my Korean experience, but that would take too long for this.
What rank had you made by the time you were fighting in Korea?
I was a lieutenant, first lieutenant. Okay. Then I went back to Nellis. Ended up going up to from Nellis. I was after a year or so, they asked me to come up to the fighter weapons school to be we ran all kinds of tests on airplanes and that sort of thing. And as far as fighter weapons school, I was put in charge of the F-100A project. And that was when the first really supersonic airplane came out, the F-100, and we got the 6 through the 12. The first 6 were sent to Edwards, and I got the next 6. I was in charge of the next 6 at Nellis. And it was the test pilot brought out. He says, one thing I want to caution you about: when you after you take off, don't relax your pressure on the stick, or things start porpoising on you. And so I said, yeah, sure. And so I was the first one to check out. So I took off. I was in a jet. Normally you relax the pressure a little bit on the stick. It's kind of, and as I relaxed the pressure, so I just pulled it back and held it back until we got out of it, until I got up my speed. And he was right about that. So anyway, we flew the airplane, and it was absolutely the worst airplane I ever flown. And it was absolutely you're just fighting it all the time, trying to fly a formation and anything. And but it was a very difficult airplane to fly, and I thought it was very dangerous. And so I wrote my report, and they sent my report up to the Pentagon in North America. And in 2 days, here come 3 lieutenant generals, 4 or 5 people from test pilots, and people from North American aviation up. And Bob Blatchow, who was another ace friend of mine, he was my commander there. He was a major. He was up trying to explain to these people what was really wrong with the airplane. He was a mathematical genius, so he was pretty good. Anyway, the day before at Edwards, the first airplane, the chief test pilot of the Royal Air Force, Britain, had taken off in the F-100. He was giving him a ride in the F-100. Got in the porpoise, couldn't get out of it, and crashed about 12 miles downrange. While Bob Blatchow was making his presentation, and we were catching hell from the North American people. Yeah, well, that's not true. And so the sergeant came in, and what the hell is this? The sergeant came in and had Bob Blatchow on note. Bob Blatchow looked at it, went over and handed it to this general. And the note read that the chief test pilot for North American, Hoover, had been killed, and his F-100 and high-speed dive of the airplane had disintegrated. So everything went. So the general read this, says, meeting's over. Take all these airplanes back to North America. So And it was about 7 or 8 months later they came back with the C model, which was they'd corrected a lot of the problems. And toward the end, when they got the Ds in the later models, it was a very good airplane. But all the computers and everything were just all screwed up in the airplane. All these airplanes fly were computer run. The new airplanes, amazing. Really. Anyway.
Before we run out of too much time, can you talk a little bit about Vietnam and how you ended up?
Well, I was in Germany at the time. I spent 2 years in Canada flying their 86s there, their Sabres, which had 10,000 altitude advantage over ours because they have their end engine in them. But I was in Germany. I was on a 3-year tour. The Vietnam War started. Some of my friends were there flying combat, and so I started volunteering to go to Vietnam. And and that rule then was you couldn't have 2 consecutive overseas tours, and so they changed the rule and let me go. So I went over, and I had a very successful run. I was doing a lot of work. I was shooting up sampans and all that. I knew we were carrying supplies and all that stuff, and all kinds of barracks buildings and what. We were supposed to be only bombing interdiction work, bridges, and highways, which was ridiculous. But that was McNamara, dirty, rotten bastard. I mean,
How do you feel about Robert McNamara?
Yeah. Robert McNamara, I think he was a traitor to our country. But he somehow talked President Johnson into restricting. If we had a 50-mile ring around Hanoi, a 30-mile ring around Haiphong, we were not allowed to go in those here. And that's where all the factories were. That's where they couldn't even bomb their make fields. We couldn't bomb their ports. Couldn't bomb their factories. Just interdiction work, which is absolutely. We could have knocked them out of the war in 3 months if they let the Air Force do it. But McNamara had a complete disdain for any military generals, and he treated them like dirt when they walked in the office. But he was something else. It was a rotten shame. But anyway, the one we were finally given a target to bomb the Hanoi POL tank farms in their big tank fields in Hanoi. They're near Hanoi. I drew up all the maps. Our squadron drew the lead. And so Colonel Holt, the wing commander, was supposedly going to lead the mission, but I knew he wouldn't because they wouldn't let full colonels fly up there. Anyway, when I walked in the room the next morning, it was going to be later in the day, and about 10 o'clock takeoff. So anyway, I walked in the thing, and so the general was standing there, and he said, "Jim, how would you like to lead this mission?" I was a major. So I was an operations officer of our squadron. All the other squadrons were flying. They all had, in my squadron commander, was a lieutenant colonel. They were all had lieutenant colonels. But I walked in, and he said, "Jim, how would you like to lead this mission?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, he took the mission folder out of Holt's hand and gave it to me, and I said, "I'm sorry about that, Colonel," And I didn't mean to say it snidely, but he thought I did. So anyway, he didn't like me anyway. So I go in, and so there's supposed to be 8 airplanes preceding ours from the south, from Karat. I don't know why they did that. Anyway, I got it when I turned the corner, went up at Thud Ridge, and I turned the corner and headed down toward Hanoi. We were up bombing from the north, and they were supposed to be bombing from the south, and they were supposed to hit us where we did, but there wasn't any smoke there, nothing, and they didn't even get a bomb on the target. Those 8 airplanes. That's smart. So I put somebody rowing down. We were right on the deck, running along, and probably 600 knots. And I looked over and held all these big guns were firing right at it. 80 military would be firing up there. And they're probably throwing shells at their own people, Anyway, we got down there and I just on my flight to the left, and I kicked in my burner and went up, rolled in, and cut my burner and dropped my dive brakes. I started down on the target. And I look, and here, nothing but big fuel tanks. I mean, hundreds of big fuel tanks. I picked up my bomb, broke around, and I came back around the field. The flames were already a couple thousand feet above me, and just from my bombs and my flight bombs, and it was a very successful mission. And I thought at that time, well, they're going to open it up for us so we can go ahead and get some real targets. They never did. So.
Did you do much one-on-one fighting in Vietnam, or was it pretty much bomb?
No, I was jumped by a MiG. By MiG's my flight. Jumped by MiGs here up Thud Ridge, coming right off the field, the pink field. I was about at least 10 minutes with this guy, trying to shake him off my tail. I was doing everything I could. They did shoot my wingman down, and a fellow named Steve Diamond, which is a shame, but and he evidently didn't make it because he wasn't in the prison. Anyway, on my 91st mission, I was shot down. My right leg was shattered when I bailed out. A stick locked on my leg when an airplane was rolling in. I had to bail out. Shattered my leg, and I knew I was in trouble because I was really woozy when my shoes opened. But
did you land in South Vietnam? You weren't captured.
Oh no, I was captured.
Oh, okay.
I was in North Vietnam up near Yen Bay. So anyway, they took me. The locals there picked me up and took me up to their hut, and it was a big wooden bamboo thing, real long. They didn't have no electricity. They had to gather their water down to the river, brought it up, boiled it. There were looked like about 50 people in this compound. Anyway, they treated me all right, but then the militia came in and they hauled me to their camp, and so they put me in this. They tried to fjord us, go across the stream, but they couldn't, so they had to back the truck up from their camp, I guess, and they put me in this little hut there. And so they brought a couple of tables, they set them up outside, and they had this Coleman lantern. And the guy said, started questioning me, and I'd give him name, rank, and everything. I had the guy sat next to me, and my leg was literally, from my knee up, was this big, this flat. All bones are up in here. And why didn't sever an artery, I don't know. Anyway, so the guy next to me and said, the name, rank, serial number, BAP. Nail me, Okay, so then said, that's how to smarten up. Who was your commander? And I give him the name of some guy that left Vietnam a long time ago. So I just started giving him phony facts, And so then all of a sudden this guy came up, put a note over the thing for this guy leading this thing. He said, I know he says you're a brigade commander. And I said, I'm a major. And see my rank? You got my rank? I didn't have a uniform. They ripped everything off it in my shorts. I said, you uniform, he got my wallet. You know, I'm a major. He said, but that terminated the interview. Anyway, because the day before I was shot down, in Time Mag, it came out in Time Magazine. I was I was supposed to be on the cover, but I told Martha that before they ran the thing, a guy had shot all those people from a tower down in San Antonio someplace, yeah, and they put him on the cover. You know. So anyway, the article in there said drove me. I was the Air Force as one-man Air Force, and this is my wife, Martha.
I didn't know if you were recording.
It's okay. We can cut out the
Record.
Okay, I am throwing groceries around. And
That's all right.
I thought about living in the Mustang and leaving. That is some cheap car.
Thank you. That's mine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's nice.
Anyway, Max was behaving himself pretty
Oh, I
good.
hope so. He got
Okay.
a lot of trouble this morning.
Okay.
I passed all your buddies on the way out here, so you're going to be running a little late.
We can wrap it up if we have to.
Well, I'm
Okay.
not trying
Okay.
to let that-
Well, we had see, where was I? Anyway, Maxie.
I'm sorry. We'll leave. I ruined his train of thought.
Anyway, I was afforded an operation by the Vietnamese because they had a genuine hero on their hands and they wanted to use me for propaganda. But although it saved my life, it afforded me a lot of torture because they started torturing me, trying to make me say things against my country, trying to make me make tapes, all sorts of things, which I couldn't do. And at one point, they turned me over to a Cuban who was there. They had assigned him 8 other guys that he was supposed to educate to do whatever he wanted them to do. He killed 2 of them by beating them to death. Well, they've tortured me ropes and irons and I wouldn't surrender. So finally they called my clothes away, my mosquito net, my water, my food. In 3 days, every hour on the hour, they come in and beat me in the back, across the back and buttocks with a fan belt. I had skin hanging off my rear end down to the floor. And after 3 days, I finally said, okay, I'll surrender. And then they just kept it up. Said, no, you, he said, every time you surrender 5 times, you take back 6. I said, you know. So they finally stopped. They threw my mosquito net back in and gave me a cup of water.
How long
So after
without water and food?
3 days. So after I surrendered, they threw my mosquito net back in and gave me a cup of water. Then after I finally got a night's sleep, they wouldn't let me sleep all that period. It's maybe in daytime they wouldn't let me sleep. So next morning, guard says, "You surrender?" I said, "No." I said, "Ugh." It was terrible. They came in and they broke a couple of my ribs, my eardrums, my jaw. But anyway, it left me. I was unconscious for all night, for all day and all night, I guess. So after that, they put me back in a cell, and Cuban left, and they didn't bother me much after that. I had a couple of sessions. They threatened me, but I told them shove it, and so they finally left me alone.
How long were you actually in?
6.5 years.
How did you mentally deal with that? How did you did you think about getting out? Did you try to?
Oh, I just tried to daydream about it. I was in solitary about 2.5 years. Yeah, but I was very sick. My leg, after the operation, developed osteomyelitis. My leg swelled up like this. I've done about 125 pounds. They finally took me. I told my roommate they put some guy with John Brodak in with me, and I told John, I said, I'm not too sure I'm going to make it, John. And so they took me. They sliced my leg open. This crap flew out of my leg, and then they brought me back and stuffed yellow stuff, bandage in my leg, but it smelled so bad, John, because it was hard to eat, and I couldn't eat anyway. But and that happened, and it started swelling up again. They finally gave me another operation when Johnson stopped the bombing, which is stupid. They gave me another operation, and this time they put 3 stitches in. They hadn't put any stitches in before. And there was about 12-inch incision there.
So were you there all the way to, was it 72 when they pretty much...
Oh, yeah.
So was that
That was
66?
Huh?
Was about, what, 1966?
I shot down 66, sure. But that was... and I was in the second group. I didn't have enough time to be in the first group after 6.5 years.
How did your wife feel with you being...
Better talk to her. She was... I don't know. I left her with 3 teenage kids, so it was tough. It was really tough on her. She did go to work at the Defense Information Center in Indianapolis, and worked as she was in charge of all she was protocol secretary there. So. And a good one too, Martha.
What? Hey?
You were a good one too.
Do you have a couple of minutes for us to put the mic on you?
We wanted to talk about what you did when you was captured. And what you care to talk about it? Or?
Well, I don't mind. That bothers me at all. But
Okay.
We got about 15 minutes of tape.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
You guys care?
Opportunity that we don't really want to miss.
Right.
You care if I leave?
No.
You've been talking all this time?
Well, we're very used to people.
This is.
This thing rang once
No,
there,
you're okay.
but it just said,
I just have like the painting.
this came on and said out of range.
You cannot get it to work in this living
Isn't that
room.
right?
Isn't that amazing? Something wrong with that.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Colonel. Okay. Thank you for your service, too.
It was an honor to meet you. Thank
Yeah.
you so
Thank you.
much. Really appreciate it.
A very brave man. Okay.
Be careful, honey.
Yeah. Let's get over
And get your
Maxwell.
cane and all that jazz.
Yeah,
Don't let your dog loose.
Okay.
You're not going to know what I say while you're gone. Daddy's got to go.
Did you know that he was alive?
Yes, I did. Actually, I was probably one of the lucky ones, if you can imagine me saying that, because as soon as he was shot down, they had this dossier on him in North Vietnam because he had been an ace in Korea, and because, can you bring those dings out? Anyway, and then he probably told you he'd been in Time magazine that very week that he got shot down, which actually was our daughter's 16th birthday. And so they knew who they had, and so they propagandized it by releasing some film showing him being put in this giant cast, which I later found out was just for purposes of being filmed, and they really didn't set his leg into different. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, at first I didn't know how bad he was hurt, even though the Air Force let me know that he was. I'm worried about my dog getting run over. Maxie. Jim just had to get going. There he is. He's okay. What's everybody's name? Jim didn't give you a cup of coffee.
Oh, no, he offered it to us. That's okay. But I'm Allison, and this is Mitch.
Allison and Mitch.
And that's Steve, who has Mustang, who's interviewing.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, this people are curious usually about how the family's managed, and it's surprising what you can do if you know you have to do it, and you don't know what you can do until you do it. I mean, until you have to do it. But anyway, they did let me know from the Air Force that they thought his leg had been badly broken, and that he was alive, and that he was going to be on TV. He was on all the network shows about, I guess it was a couple of weeks after he was shot down. And
You saw that.
and we sat and all watched that, and that was our assurance that he was alive. And see, once they showed him on TV, in order to save face, they would have to account for him. At least this is what they kept telling me. This was reassuring to me. And see, a lot of our friends, my friends' husbands were listed as missing. It's okay. You want to turn it on? Max? No.
We'll edit all that out.
Okay.
Just kinda
Anyway,
wait till you get back in here and then-
could you get in all right? Well, this is, they act up when their mother comes home. So that's how I found out, and I felt not quite as, I knew he was alive. And knowing Jim, I kept thinking any minute he would escape. This is how dumb I was back in those days. And of course, never dreaming it would be, 6.5 years before I would see him again. And so it was actually 7 years and 1 day that he was gone until we saw him. Our twins were 13 when he left and were 20 when he came home. So I accused him of planning the whole thing. This is back in the 60s, and those teenagers. But anyway, we knew a lot of people whose husbands were listed as MIA. And I'll tell you the difference between knowing and hoping was a big difference. So that was kind of...
Were you living here in Kankakee?
You know where? No, actually, we lived in Indianapolis. That was where Jim and I both went to school, and my mother was there, and my sister, some family. So we thought it would be, a year, 18 months max while he was gone, and that we would stay there until he came back, and then we'd go on wherever we got stationed. So, of course, then as I say, never dreaming we'd be there all that time. But in a way, it was good. Indianapolis is a great military town. And so is this community. I think throughout the Midwest, people are very. Now I'm not underestimating the anti-war stuff that went on during the Vietnam War. That was very disconcerting. But as far as just feeling cared for, Jim was like, they all knew about him because he'd been an ace in Korea, and they just kind of kept track of him throughout the whole military career that he had. So. It was good for us to be there. And that way, then when I started working at Fort Benjamin Harrison, it kept me in contact with the military. So I worked there for 5 years. And that was good, because I was kind of dwelling a little too much on the kids, I think. You know how you can with your teenagers. So.
Did you get any kind of support from the military during
Yep.
that period? Did you receive his pay or anything like that?
Absolutely. He had signed something, and I don't know if everybody did this or it was standard procedure or not, but signed something that 100% of his pay I got, and it was automatically deposited in our bank account, which we had before he ever left, and they made that very easy for us, and they were also very accommodating. I thought they were very accommodating. That we had counselors. I mean, I would go to like Grissom Air Force Base, and I had an advisor over there. And later on, I'd go to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base over at Dayton. But in the beginning, it was really kind of strange because nobody knew. In the first place, they didn't want us to tell anybody that our husbands were over there. Because I remember I went to buy a new car. Oh, no, I went to get my driver's license, or a new license plate for my car. In Indianapolis, Indiana's different than here. And you have to show them all kinds of stuff and sign all kinds of stuff. And they said, well, you're going to have your husband sign this. And I said, well, he's not here. He's in Southeast Asia, because that's what they told us to say. They said, well, just send it to him, have him send it right back. Finally, it ended up that I had to tell him that he was a prisoner of war. And it was just dumb. I don't know why they didn't want us to say anything, but this was during the Johnson administration. So finally, then, when Nixon got elected, I began to see a little bit of, I thought, clear skies, but it took a long time. And they made it, we all went public, all the wives, and so I started giving talks, the Rotary, like you would around here, telling everybody, because it was amazing how many people really did not know that there were prisoners of war, American prisoners of war in Hanoi. It was amazing. Unless you were associated with, you guys were probably really young, or were you born yet?
Born.
I was going to say, were you born yet?
Yeah, I was born in '66.
See, that's the year Jim got shot down. So unless people were connected with the military in some way back in those days, they were really not aware, except for the fact that it was being protested by a lot of people.
Did you feel, you must have felt extremely frustrated and angry that there were protesters and there were people who were...
Oh, I did.
Who were...
Especially Jane Fonda, and there were a lot of Americans. I remember Bella Ebb. I can't remember them all, but there was several senators that would go back and forth to Hanoi. I thought, it's just amazing to me. I sit there all these years, and I can't see my husband, and they can go back and forth in there. And they caused the guys, I'm sure Jim told you, they're the ones that caused them to be tortured so badly because they wanted Jim to sign a statement against the war. So you understand all that. Hopefully, I'm hoping that they're teaching some of the kids in school some of this stuff. And I like it when Jim talks to young people. And a lot of them are, they're just awed because a lot of them, of course, the fact that he was a fighter pilot, but also that they didn't really, until they meet someone in person, like that's been through this kind of an experience, it's just, that's like a book or something to them. So, but we managed. We took one day at a time. And
did you ever lose faith that he was going to get back, or did you?
Of course, I got, I had ups and downs. I never ever thought Jim would not come back. I really never did. And I did think now it's probably going to, we're going to have to really transition. It's going to really take some getting to know and all this. You know what? It was just like I'd seen him yesterday when he came home. Even though, he was thin and I wasn't even sure he'd have a leg or teeth or hair or anything. It was amazing. But see, we'd been married, 17 years or so before he ever went over there. So we had a good foundation to begin with, and that really makes a big difference.
For a person who's never experienced anything like this, it would be almost like he came back from the dead.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people always, that's what they say. How did you do it? I said, well, you don't know what you can do until you have to do it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a simplification, but really, you usually just do what you have to do. And I had a lot of support from my family, and my mother lived right there, and then some good things came out of that. Our kids being military brats hadn't had a real grandparent relationship, and they got to know my mom really well and Jim's folks real well. And so, you had to look for the good stuff.
Did you go out and meet him? Where did they come back?
Yes, when he came home, well, first of all, they landed in the Philippines. And all of them did that, and they kind of debriefed them all there for a couple days. It's a long trip, and they let them get oriented there. And in fact, this painting that's up here, this Maxine McCaffrey did, she was there. She was their Air Force official artist, and she did that painting of Jim in the Philippines, or that started that. And there's one just like it, I think, in the Pentagon. But anyway. The Air Force notified it. It was, okay, he's going to be in the second plane load, and you have to just keep watching TV, and you'll see him, land in the Philippines. So we all, all the three kids and I sat down, and we stayed up till, I bet, 2 o'clock in the morning, watching TV, watching. And this is all the news. You guys probably can't even imagine. But the prisoners coming home was big news. And so finally, I said, listen, I've got to go to bed. And the girls wanted to go to bed. And Jimmy said, I'm not going to bed. And I said, okay, as soon as you see anything, you yell and tell us. And so we seemed like we no sooner got upstairs and got ready for bed than we heard Jim yell, quick, here comes Dad. And it was like the Three Stooges. We met in that doorway, and we could all hardly get in. And I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I thought, don't tell me I've lasted 7 years and now I'm going to die of a heart attack. So it was pretty exciting. And then it was like a whirlwind because instead of just having to get to know each other again, went back over to the BOQ, got dressed for dinner. He wanted to know what those were, and they were pantyhose because he'd never seen pantyhose before. And they were treated us royally. All the families were treated so nice, and the doctors all had us to dinner because we stayed 2 weeks at Wright Pat. I think it was 2 weeks. Anyway, before they could let them all go back into the world. And, he was fascinated because in the BX they had all these bright Puccini-looking golf pants and bright shirts. And when he left to go over there, men wore gray and tan and brown and navy blue, and that was it. But then we went through this cycle where they started wearing all these bright clothes like they're kind of starting to do now again. And he loved it because he's always liked bright clothes. So we shopped in the BX, I'll tell you. But it was fun. We were invited to go. We went down to the Doral Beach Club for a week at their expense, and then we went out to Ross Perot's, a big party for 3 or 4 days at his expense. So we got treated pretty royally, and I was just in a state of shock because I thought I'd be reading to him in the hospital for a couple of weeks, or a month. We were off and running, I'll tell you.
Did he need any type of, did the military offer any type of therapy or counseling?
Yes, they did. In fact, they practically insisted on it, but he wouldn't. He said no, he didn't need any counseling. And actually, Jim was pretty much developed in what he was before he ever got shot down, and he really came home pretty much the same. But I do think that this book that they finally got him to do has been good for him, been therapeutic for him, even though I don't think he realized it would be. Just to tell his story and to sit here and tell you guys, I think is good for him too. You're going to have to edit a lot of this out. Jeez Louise. Anyway, that's kind of what we did. We just hung out. That was our
You're a hero too.
Well,
All this.
now, there are lots of people like me. It's just that you don't know them, unless you happen to know them. Yeah. But I do know a lot of wives, and I know a lot of wives whose husbands didn't come home. And I know a lot of men whose wives divorced them while they were gone. And you couldn't judge them at all because, Alvarez's wife, he was probably the longest, I think, prisoner.
The first one.
And they'd only been married 2 years. And here he was gone like 9 years. Well, she had friends that she knew better than she knew her husband. And, she did get a divorce and remarried, which, as they say, you just go on with your life and you're that young. And you think it's not ever going to end. For once in a while, you do think that.
Did the wives whose husbands, their situation was not determined, because Jim was more known and you knew that he was alive in there, did they get their husbands' pay if they didn't know if they were captured or not?
I think they did. I don't know whether the husbands had to sign this thing saying so before they went over there or not. But I really don't think there was any problem. I know there was some things you couldn't do, like we were part owners in this golf course, and I would have sold it in a heartbeat. But legally I couldn't do anything like that without his being here. And so things like that were all kept intact. And I think a certain amount of his pay had to be put away or something. I can't remember all that, but I know we were fine.
Because were there very many men who were captured that they didn't know that they had been captured, or was it pretty much we knew who was in there?
No. In the beginning especially, they didn't know who all was down, who was alive, and there were lots and lots of them listed as missing in action. And then after the guys all got in there and started they developed this tap code, and they found a way to kind of communicate a little bit, then they were starting to send back names of other people that were in there. And then so-and-so's wife would find out that her husband was really alive, and maybe she had thought he was dead. So, but every day you'd read in the paper, about how many F-105s were shot down that day. It was like Russian roulette. It was a wild time.
Did the North Vietnamese ever give an accounting for who was there before the end, or did they just leave it right? It had to come out in letters.
I think I think at the peace treaty there, I'm not sure, that they might have given some lists. I'm not positive about that. But the Air Force, somehow or other, and as I say, I know the guys probably wrote back in little codes on their little letters that they sent back. And so.
Did you keep up with any of the other wives you met after their husbands came back?
Well, you mean the
Like
POW wives?
Yeah.
Well, actually, we've kind of lost track now, but we had a like a real nucleus of family of Indiana wives or mothers and dads. The mothers and fathers were, and to this day, there'll be mothers and fathers whose kids are listed as MIA, and they will not ever not think they're can't be found. But it's probably not likely that they will.
Yeah, I know that in the 80s and early 90s, it was all the rage that people were believing that there were still people being held. Did you ever believe that, or did you think they all came out in 72?
Well, I think Jim, I'm not speaking for him, but I think that just from what I gathered, he didn't think that there were very many that would come out that were alive. And I know that people still go back now, and they have committees that go in and they search and investigate. Once in a while, they do find some kind of remains that they can identify as former MIAs, and then they will legally declare them dead. So I was going to say, did I do that?
I thought I put this on vibrate. Whoever they were, sorry.
Isn't it nice to have caller ID?
Oh, yeah. I don't know who it was. Sorry about that.
So now, where are you from?
We're from the Kankakee Public Library.
Well, I thought you were.
Yeah.
Right.
And so
I've talked with you a couple times on the phone, I think over the last couple
Yeah.
of years. We wanted Colonel Kasler to do a program at the library a couple of years ago, and I think we just couldn't get our schedules. I know that,
There was kind of a real peak there, and in fact, he's been doing a lot of speaking lately. He's kind of burned out, I think, just locally. And now he's been doing a lot all over the place. But it doesn't bother him. It doesn't. In fact, I think sometimes he likes to talk about his experiences. But I think he just kind of, so many people had heard his story here, over and over. But he spoke at the Library of Congress, and so I thought, well, maybe what are you going to do with this?
Well, we're actually making a series of episodes on people from the area.
Oh,
Who, our first episode is all about World War II and Kankakeeans and people from Kankakee County who served in World War II and their own experiences in the war. And with Colonel Kasler, it's wonderful because he gave us his experiences from all three wars.
Oh dear.
Which is,
jeez.
No, we asked for it, But so Mitchell is editing. Mitchell and Steve are editing these.
You may have to edit quite a bit, Mitchell.
And
Especially, I wish you'd edit me out. I'm not kidding. I have just been out looking like this.
Oh, you look great.
Oh, listen, thank you, but oh.
I can't believe. Now you must be close to. Are you that much younger than him? You two were in college at the same time, so you have to be the same.
No, I'm not that much younger than him, and we've been married 58 years.
Wow.
So.
I would not believe it.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say. Thank you.
No, when he said, "This is Martha coming in,"
well, I wasn't sure you guys would still be here because I wasn't sure exactly what it was you were going to do. Because see, Jim he gets on the phone and I never know what's going on. He said, "Oh, they're coming out from the library." I said, "What?" And he said, "They're coming out to interview me." I said, "Oh," I think he thought maybe just you or I. So then when you called, I said, "Jim, I think more than one person is coming out from the library."
Yeah.
So this is great. So you can just edit out and do what.
We're doing this with the Historical Society and stuff, and we're just trying to get. It's primarily World War II stuff we're doing right now. But my mind is just going a mile a minute thinking about what we can do with your section.
I know.
Well,
you were a
that's
bonus
a whole,
because
that's a whole other perspective that's just fascinating.
right.
Oh, you mean
of the wives?
The wives.
The POWs.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that a lot of people do ask about it, but
Right.
I don't know.
To me, that's just amazing. That I don't know. It's like you said, it's hard. You don't know what you're capable of.
You don't know what you can do until you have to
She
do
gets
it.
worried when her husband's gone overnight. Forget 7 years.
You wouldn't last long being a fighter pilot's wife, I
No.
believe
I
it.
don't think I would.
Because, you know, he was a year in Korea, and then 6 months in Italy, and then all those years. And so that's probably why we were married so long. It's 58 years because he was never home. No.
Another thing that I've heard some women say, that when their husbands came home after a long time, there was a little resentment because they wanted to sort of, be in charge again, and you had been doing it for 7 years, and you were like, it's okay, I know
Actually,
how to do this.
there is a lot of truth to that because you learn, whether you want to or not, you learn how to pay all the bills and
run the house.
and run the house and make big decisions like where you're going, your kids are going to college, or whether you're going to buy a house or a new car, or things that you don't ordinarily do all by, or we back in those days, wives didn't do that so much. Now I think they do. And
Did you buy a home while he was gone?
no, actually I didn't, but I did move once, and our oldest daughter got married too, and that was traumatic because she was Daddy's girl, and she was devastated when Jim was shot down. Well, we all were, but especially Suzanne, and so she had this really wonderful boyfriend, and back in those days, kids were just beginning to sort of move in and live together, but it was not, it was not the way we were raised. So she was afraid that rather than do that, she was afraid her dad wouldn't approve. She said she and Fred wanted to get married. They were at the university, or she was at the University of Cincinnati, and her husband to be was at the Miami of Ohio. So I think it was about their second or third year that they got married in Indianapolis. He was from Indianapolis too, and they were married for about I guess 7 years. But after, it was amazing because as soon as Jim came home, her dad came home, Suzanne turned back into the person that she had been, and instead of she was kind of clingy and depending on Fred, that marriage ended. It was just a case of them getting married a little too young, and she's gone on to have a real career of her own. She's got a great design business and down in Atlanta. She's married and has a little girl.
What kind of design?
Interior design, yeah,
Did she do your home? Or did you
No, actually, they probably gave up on me.
Beautiful.
Oh, thanks. In fact, we bought a furnished place. It was like a model. It was furnished down in Florida, and I said, there's something sort of Freudian about this whole thing, because I think the girls, both my girls are designers. I think they were so happy that they didn't have to come and fight with us. See, I get attached to some of the old stuff that we've carted all over the world, and designers change things a lot, believe me. So.
Well, your home's lovely.
Well, thanks. Thank you. Have we about run out of time
I
now?
think we've run out of tape, so I think.
Yeah. Well,